Hey everybody, back with another video. In my last video I was doing signature analysis on these Williams boards, and I continued after I did that video and started further documenting all the signatures with one of my Robotron boards. And then I was pretty much done troubleshooting it, and I was just going to re-verify all my work. So I went to put the Robotron board back in the game, and it was getting a 131 error just like the Joust board is. So this is my Sinistar board set. But anyway, we're not going to be at the bench. We're going to go to the Robotron cab, and I don't know if I screwed something up when I was probing around and using it to record signatures, or if I have some power issue or something else going on in my cab. So let's go to the Robotron and start troubleshooting the 131 error. Alright, so here's my Robotron, and I think even in my last video here, hopefully I'll stay out of the shadow a little bit. I have some extra light shining here. It has the original connector, and I said I was actually going to replace the connector, and I didn't. So it has original IDC connectors, even in here, that you can't see, but it's original IDC connectors there as well. So I probably need to do some maintenance. This is all numbers matching. It's almost like the Stargate video that I'll link to as well. It's all numbers matching Robotron 5758868, 57868, 57868 on the power supply, soundboards, everything, even the monitor there. So this Robotron cabinet, it's actually not in too great of shape, especially at the bottom. It's got some stuff going on there. I'm in a tight spot, but anyway, let's power it on and see what we get on our error codes. 131, 131, the dreaded 131 error. And I can see, I believe that all three of my LEDs are lit, but we really don't know what our power is getting. And so what I'm going to do is, these are our RAM banks, and on this side here is the decoupling cap for the minus 5 volts, and then on this side is plus 12, minus 5, plus 12, minus 5, plus 12. I believe that's the case, or this is plus 12, minus 5. I don't know. We're gonna double check, but I'll show you how to measure the voltage by just hooking up to these decoupling capacitors, and these decoupling capacitors up here are our 5 volts, plus 5 volts. So I will hook up to the voltmeter and see what we are getting from a voltage standpoint. Alright, so I have my leads hooked up. This is a ground over here on the bottom capacitor there. You could actually hook up anywhere, and then hooked up right there. We'll turn it on, and wow, 2.5 volts. Is that on our 12 volt line? Now let's come to this side. Our minus 5 looks good. Minus 5 looks good, but our 12 volt line is only getting 2.5 volts. And if we come to our 5 volt side, which should be, I think, this side, we're getting 4.6, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. But even though our 12 volt line, I'm sorry, I'm kind of reaching all over the place, our LED is on, but we're not getting 12 volts at the board. So let me go ahead and test the 12 volts at the power supply, but that seems to be our problem. All of a sudden, when I put this board back in there, we're not getting 12 volts anymore. 2.5 volts on the 12 volt line. So be right back. I'm trying to get enough light here for you guys, but basically there's lots of ways, and I've shown this before, how to test these power supplies, but the easiest way is really to hook up your black lead to negative, and it could be, it could be even here if you wanted to hold it there. The ground strap is ground. Also, the negative side of this filtering capacitor is ground. And then you could also go to, well, we got to get 12 volts there. So something's bringing down our 12 volts on our board. Weird. -5 is good. But we're only getting 2.6 volts at the board. But if we check our 12 volts on R2, anyway, what I was going to show is basically one way you can do it is just to come to each side of the resistor feeding the LED, and that's 5 volts right there. So R1, if you can see that, if I just take my red lead, put it on R1, we got 5 volts, R2, 12.1 volts, and then 5.129 volts. Alright, so we know our power supply is good. So why is our 12 volts dropping? Is one of these bad RAM chips potentially, I don't see anything inserted wrong. One of these 12 volt, one of these RAMs could be shorted or something, bringing the 12, something on the 12 volt line is not right. Let me see if that's 12 volts right there. No, it's probably the red one, orange. No, that's 5 volts. That's regular, I think unregulated 10 volts. That's 5 volts. Huh. Something on this board is bringing down our 12 volts, and that's our problem. So it's definitely not the power supply. We verified the power supply is good, but if we come up here and measure 12 volts at this board, it's bad. So something is shorted on the 12 volt line. Gotta figure that out. It'll be difficult for me to show this on. So I disconnected whatever this is, whatever that connector is called, but the power connector to the main CPU board, and I'm just probing this gray yellow line. And if you can see that, I have 12 volts. Something is shorted on this board in the 12 volt line. The first thing I'm going to do is probably remove RAM chips. I don't know. I think I'm going to remove the RAM chips, and check also these capacitors. Everything's plugged in the right. Interesting. So maybe I did end up shorting something out when I was doing signature analysis in the probe, or it's just, circumstance, I guess, or whatever. Well, this could be the quickest video ever. I just basically plugged my connector back in, and I was going to come back here because it's the next day. Actually, I haven't been motivated to work on shit, but I just plugged that back in, rebooted it, and now I'm getting no errors. No 131 errors. There it is. And my voltage minus 5.2 on the -5. That can go all the way up to 4.5 or 5.5. Same with the 12 volts. It's not as and now I'm getting 11 volts on my plus 12. So again, you can just check it at the capacitors here, if you can see that. This row is plus 12, and then this row here is the -5, and it's easier to check that than trying to go to the corners of the RAM chips itself. So anyway, why is that? I think I need to pin this out. I'm back here, and yes, it's working now, but I should really take the time to repin this stuff. It's all original. Should I? I don't really feel like it. Anyway, let's see. I'll think about what I want to do if I actually want to pin this stuff out. But the fact that I was able to get my 5 volts back just by reseating this seems crazy, right? So at a minimum, I'm actually going to at least repin that one out. And also take the board back off and replace the header, because I was supposed to be doing that anyway. So let me do that. Alright, and most of my videos, I don't film actually replacing this stuff and soldering and desoldering, but I do like to say how I do it. So I basically heat up from the bottom and pull the pins out, that way, try to pull them out. And there's my work right there real quick, and everything looks fine, right? So, but most people say, you know, you don't need to ever replace, almost never do you have to replace these capacitors on the PCB. But I was testing this one, and it's showing for 22 microfarads, it's definitely in the yellow range for 22 microfarads. That's a 22 microfarad cap. So I figured I would just test these real quick with you, and I might actually replace these, but just that one, I mean. This one here, we'll test that. And you can tell that's good. These are, I think, for the 5 volts, 12 volts, and minus 5 volts. Yeah, see that one's really good. And that one's really good too. But that 22 microfarad one is, and I don't know exactly what it's doing. It's from the ground. I wonder if that's to 5 volts as well. See, this is, I think that's to the unregulated 12 volts or whatever. It's like around 10 volts. Not sure what that's doing. This one here, I think, is the 5 volts. I'm going to replace this thing. I don't know. Be right back. So I just want to measure that real quick. You definitely don't have to do this, and I didn't even clean off my bench. That's why it's so messy. But you don't have to do all this testing and stuff. Because I have the tools, you know, I do it, and that's better, right? We're at the 0.75 versus like 2.5. So these caps were fine, and I would say in general you don't have to replace caps on PCBs. It's usually never part of the problem, but because I have this ESR meter and it takes me 5 seconds to test it at my bench, I figured I'd do it and show you guys the results. So this board's ready to go back in. I need to pin stuff out. The other thing is, it's always nice to have spare capacitors. If I didn't have some of those like spare parts around, I wouldn't have done that, especially having like headers. Great Plains Electronics is usually where I get mine, but you can get them from other places too. But I usually order mine from Ed at Great Plains, and just having these kind of parts around makes this a lot more enjoyable when you're trying to fix your own games and you got a whole bunch of games to fix. So, like, actually, let's see here. Like, there's my little setup of all my different, you know, Trifurcon pins and connectors and stuff like that. So it's just good to have them every type on stock and then order them so you have them on hand. I already did the part in the cabinet with the put the board back in, but I was looking at this power supply and I can tell it wasn't recapped, so I figured I'd take it out. What's interesting is this heat sink and the bridge rectifier. A lot of times the bridge rectifier is not mounted off the board like this, which you want to do to give it more cooling and let air get underneath of it and stuff. And I haven't seen a heatsink like this put on top of these bridge rectifiers before, but maybe that's something common. But it does look like this has been replaced. Yeah, if you look at the solder flux and stuff like that, it does look like somebody reflowed the headers, because you can kind of see that too, the leftover flux. But they didn't replace the caps or anything, and I'll just go ahead and verify the fuses, make sure they're the right values, and I will put my ESR meter on these caps. Typically, I think I did this in a previous video, so I'm not going to show everything, but usually these caps are still okay. But if I see one that's bad, I'll come back and film that. But I am going to replace all these headers. If you can see the discoloration there, there's definitely, it's not terrible, and there was no burn marks on the connector itself, on the IDC connector coming from the transformer. This connector here, like 4J2 or whatever, goes to the PCB, and it doesn't look too bad. You can see some oxidation and stuff. The one from the transformer looks a little bit worse, and it's just good maintenance. I mean, it's just good. I'm already in there, so I might as well replace these two. Screw it. But I like to listen to music while I'm doing this, so I'm going to pause, do this off camera, and then come back with anything I find that's interesting. Alright, I have all new connectors on here, and I did check these fuses. F1 is supposed to be 1 amp, then it's 5 amps for F2 and 4 amps for F3, which is, I think, is that the 12 volt line? I'm pretty sure. Let's see if I can get it out. But this one, they actually have a 5 amp in here. So I need to replace that and double check my notes, because I'm sure it's 1, 5, 4, 7, 7. I think that's right. I don't know why they put a 5 amp fuse. At least the documentation says it should be 1, 5, 4, I think, or 1, 4, 5, something like that. But anyway, I'll double check. But one of them's bad or wrong. And I also checked these capacitors, and every single one of them tests fine with ESR. I tested this one, these two. This is the B. This is not B plus. This is your filter capacitor. We can check for noise on the line or whatever, ripple voltage when we put it in the cabinet. But then I checked this I think it's C11, and I will show you that real quick, because that one does not look that great. Where's that? C11. Right there. It's a 22 microfarad cap on the negative 5 volt line. And we're getting 10 on the ESR for a 22 microfarad, and that's not reading good. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that one, but the rest of them are good. And if you order a cap kit, that's fine. The other thing I wanted, I mean, you can replace all these capacitors. I mean, I'm just not going to, because they're good. But it doesn't hurt to replace them. The other thing is, I think the directions say actually that you have to, in the manual, it says you're supposed to mount this bridge rectifier at least 1/8 of an inch off of the PCB. So the Williams manual does say to raise it up, but this one has definitely been replaced, because I don't think it was that high, and I don't think it had a heatsink, which is kind of cool that somebody put that on there. And the other thing just to keep in mind is you'll often see R10 removed. The manual says if your voltage is less than 4.75, probably at the board, I assume, go ahead, you can remove R10, and that will increase your voltage. So I think I've shown some videos before where I actually put in a pot there, a potentiometer, to actually make it, or a variable resistor to make it variable so you can adjust it. I did a video on that I'll link to. But for this one, the voltage was pretty decent. I think it was 4.6. After replacing all these pins and headers, I bet we're going to be fine. But if we do want to raise it up some, I'm just going to remove R10 right there. But we won't know until we get into the cabinet. So I'm going to replace this C11 capacitor, and then this F3, I believe, with a 4 amp fuse, which is the right fuse, and then we'll be back at the cabinet. Alright, I'm back at the cabinet. I got everything repinned out, the power supply I put back in. I'm going to leave 4J2, the connector that goes to the PCBs, off while I power it up, but everything has been repinned out, from the transformer in here, new headers and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I hooked up to my negative. You can hook up to many places, but I told you earlier, just hook up on the negative side of that capacitor, and we're going to test our 5 volts at R1, and then 12 volts at R2, and then -5 at that side of R3. So be right back. Let me power this thing on. Hopefully nothing smokes. Or I guess I could power it on. Let me see if I can reset real quick. I did. Well, nothing smoked, which is good. The LEDs are on. Alright, we got 5 volts, 12 volts, and -5.1 volts. Alright, so that's good. Let's check our ripple voltage by going to AC power and just come to the other side of this B+. 0.0005. I think you can go to one of these test points too, test point 5 as well. Yeah, and you can check it to the 5 volts as well, which is, which one is the 5 volt test point? Is it that one? No. I forget which one's the 5 volts. I think it's one side of a resistor. This is 12 volts, right? Regardless, it's low. We're good there. So let me power it off, put our board back on. Connect this connector here, and then we'll measure it at our PCB. We'll measure the voltage on our PCB. Here it goes. Hopefully we got good 5 volts. Yeah. No error. So it's a little bit hard for me to show you, but this is the 5 volts right here. You can just test it at one of these capacitors right there. I have my negative lead on the negative side of one of these decoupling caps, and then that's the 5 volts. Now we're at 4.9 volts at the PCB, and I think we were at 4.6 before. So, you know, repinning this out, putting new headers there, repinning all of that out, I think gave us like a 0.3 volt increase. Let's check our 12 volts. We're at 12.02. If we check our -5, -5.1, which is a little bit lower, so it's better than it was before, probably because of the 5 volts is better. 4.9 volts, so we are looking good. Let me go ahead and, I gotta tell you, it's not fun doing all this stuff, but it probably took me a couple hours, just taking my time, having a beer, and but being on the floor and working at the back of this cabinet and shit is not really a lot of fun, but definitely worth doing. The only thing I could have done extra is just preventive maintenance, is replace some of those bottle cap transistors. But honestly, I think I'm good. And I replaced the -5 volt capacitor on that power supply, replaced this capacitor here, and I think this is going to give me some more trouble-free results here. Also, you could repin out this power supply here, but typically the ROM board power, it is 5 volts. It's not that big of a deal. I don't think I've ever seen this really get too hot or anything like that. And also the soundboard, the power on that too, but it's all good. All right, let me come back. Maybe we'll play some. I spoke too soon. I think when I had this on the bench, what did I do? I cut that trace or something, right? I cut a trace. I cut that right there, so I could get composite vertical sync. Composite negative. So I could get basically negative sync. I cut that trace right there, and this monitor is original, so it's using positive sync, I'm sure. Yes, it's using positive sync, not negative sync. So right now I'm putting out negative sync, and the monitor is wired up for positive sync like all Williams boards are. I need to put a jumper in there. I got to take this PCB back off, put a jumper in right here, and go back to positive sync versus negative. So one more step and then we'll put it in. All right, as you can see, hopefully if I get some light on there, but that's where I just put in one of the leads from the capacitors I use. I just put that in there real quick. So let's power it up, see what we get. Hopefully I'm looking at my 0. Come on, no 131 error anymore. Bam. Hopefully we have sync, and we have good sync. Alright, so now I'm going to actually go ahead and put this in the lineup and finish cleaning up the floor where I made a mess, and let's play Robotron. Alright, I think my battery, because I have the, where did I have the battery at? No, it should be okay. Yeah, my high score should be fine. I was thinking maybe my high scores wouldn't be okay, but hopefully you guys can see this okay. I'm kind of off to the side a little bit, and I'm not very good, but oh, I guess it didn't save my settings. Why would that be? Or what the hell's going on? Is something not hooked up right? Price selection. I know I had it on free play. Alright, here we go. Damn. Yeah, I'm screwing up already. I'm usually better than this. Oh my God. I thought I was gonna. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Bad game. There we go. That's it. A little bit of Robotron. Yeah, my high score's gone. Oh well. That's it, guys. A little bit of Robotron. Fix some Robotron here. Talk to you next time. Bye.